5 luxury SUVs sat buried axle-deep in black Texas mud on a Sunday morning. A white Tahoe, a black Escalade, a silver Yukon, a Lincoln Navigator, a brand-new Range Rover. Together, they were worth more than most houses in my county. Now they couldn't move an inch. The drivers stood knee-deep in mud, yelling at each other. The HOA president was screaming at the sheriff, and I was leaning against a fence post drinking coffee. The sheriff looked from the stuck vehicles to me. Then he smiled. "Mr. Walker," he said, "I'm starting to think those no trespassing signs were there for a reason." The HOA president's face turned red. "You can't blame us for this." The sheriff pointed toward a line of broken fence posts lying in the grass. "Ma'am, I can blame you for quite a few things." What nobody standing there knew was that this disaster hadn't started that morning. It had started 8 months earlier. My name is Ethan Walker. I'm 58 years old. Most people around Mason County know me as a cattle rancher. What they don't know is that before I came home to run my family's ranch, I spent 23 years working as a highway drainage engineer for the state of Texas. My job was studying water, how it moved, where it collected, and what happened when people underestimated it. That knowledge ended up saving my ranch and destroying an HOA president's reputation. The Walker Ranch sits on nearly 300 acres of rolling Texas pasture land. My grandfather bought it after returning from World War II. My father expanded it, and when he passed away 3 years ago, it became my responsibility. The land isn't fancy. No golf courses, no gated entrances, no decorative fountains, just cattle, oak trees, stock ponds, and miles of open pasture. Exactly the way I like it. For decades, nobody bothered us. Then came Silver Creek Estates. A developer purchased 60 acres bordering our eastern property line. Within 2 years, the quiet pasture next door turned into a subdivision filled with expensive homes and people who wanted country views without country life. And leading all of them was a woman named Brenda Collins. Brenda was the HOA president, 54 years old, always dressed like she was running for mayor, always talking like she owned whatever she happened to be standing on. The first time we met, she arrived at my ranch in a white Cadillac SUV. She didn't introduce herself, didn't shake my hand, didn't even smile. She simply pointed toward my cattle. "Those cows are visible from several homes." I remember staring at her for a moment. Then I said, "They're cows." She nodded. "Exactly." That was my introduction to Brenda Collins. 3 weeks later, the complaint started. According to the HOA, my cattle created unpleasant odors. My equipment shed reduced property values. My feed trucks were too loud. My fences looked unattractive. At first, I ignored it. The HOA had no authority over my property. Everyone knew that, even Brenda. But she wasn't interested in rules. She was interested in getting her way. The real conflict began with an old ranch road. The dirt road crossed part of my northern pasture before connecting to a county road. My family built it decades ago. It existed solely for ranch operations. Equipment, livestock trailers, feed deliveries, nothing else. Legally, it was private property. Always had been, always would be. Unfortunately, Silver Creek residents discovered it could save them nearly 10 minutes during rush hour. Soon strangers were driving across my ranch daily. SUVs, pickup trucks, delivery vans, even golf carts. At first I tried being polite. I posted signs. Private property. No trespassing. Do not enter. The signs disappeared. I replaced them. Those disappeared too. Then somebody drove through a section of fencing and left the gate hanging sideways. Repair cost, $800. No apology. No responsibility. Just tire tracks leading towards Silver Creek Estates. I installed trail cameras. Within a week, I had footage of residents ignoring signs and cutting across my land. One video showed Brenda herself driving directly past a warning sign. She actually looked at it before continuing. That told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't confusion. It was entitlement. Then one afternoon, my phone rang. It was Deputy Frank Morrison. "Ethan," he said, "you got a minute?" "Sure. I've got Brenda Collins sitting in my office claiming your ranch road is public access." I laughed. Frank didn't. "Ethan, she's serious." That got my attention. Over the next month, Brenda began telling residents that the road belonged to the community. According to her, my family had no right to block it, no right to restrict access, no right to control who used it. The problem? Every word was a lie. County records clearly showed the road belonged entirely to the Walker Ranch. But facts weren't stopping her. Because Brenda had discovered something dangerous. Most people would rather avoid conflict than fight it. And she counted on that. Unfortunately for her, I wasn't most people. After the fence incident, I hired a survey company. They confirmed every property boundary, every easement, every access point. Exactly what I already knew. The road was mine. Completely. Then I installed a heavy-duty steel ranch gate. Not decorative. Not fancy. Just strong. 12-foot steel tubing. Concrete set posts. Industrial lock. The kind of gate that sends a simple message. This land has an owner. For the first 2 days, nothing happened. On the third day, my phone alerted me to motion at the gate camera. I opened the footage and felt my stomach tighten. Because standing beside my gate was Brenda Collins. And she wasn't alone. Brenda Collins wasn't alone. Standing beside my ranch gate were 3 men wearing work boots and reflective vests. One of them was unloading a portable cutting saw. For a moment, I thought maybe I was misunderstanding what I was seeing. Then Brenda pointed directly at my gate. The man started the saw. The camera microphone picked up the sound, even from 30 yards away. A high-pitched metallic scream. Sparks exploded into the afternoon air. And just like that, they began cutting through my property. I watched the entire thing from my kitchen table. Didn't call. Didn't drive over. Didn't interfere. I simply recorded everything. Because experience had taught me something important. People like Brenda always think they're smarter than everyone else. The fastest way to beat them is to let them keep talking. And keep acting. Within 6 minutes, my gate was lying in the dirt. Brenda stepped over it like she was crossing a puddle. Then she drove straight through my pasture. The next morning, I filed a sheriff's report. Not because I expected immediate action. Because I wanted documentation. A paper trail. Something Brenda apparently didn't believe in. The weeks that followed were exactly what I expected. County inspectors started appearing. Water department. Environmental services. Livestock compliance. Drainage enforcement. Every complaint was anonymous. Every complaint was false. Every inspection passed. One inspector finally pulled me aside. "Ethan," he said quietly, "somebody's trying very hard to create problems for you." I smiled. I know exactly who. By then, I had filled an entire file cabinet drawer with reports, photographs, and camera footage. Most people would have been exhausted. I was getting organized. Then Brenda made her biggest mistake. She hired attorneys. A certified letter arrived demanding that I restore what they called community access rights. The document claimed residents had been using the road for years and therefore deserved permanent access. I read it twice. Then I laughed so hard coffee nearly came out of my nose. Because unlike Brenda, I actually read legal records. That night, I opened county archives and started digging. 3 hours later, I found something interesting. 5 hours later, I found something devastating. The subdivision's original development plans. As a former highway drainage engineer, I understood exactly what I was looking at. And what I saw made my eyebrows rise. Silver Creek Estates had been approved under specific drainage requirements. Retention basins, runoff controls, emergency overflow channels. All required. All signed off. There was only one problem. Half of them had never been built. I checked satellite imagery, construction records, inspection reports. Everything pointed to the same conclusion. Someone had cut corners. Expensive corners. Very expensive corners. Then I noticed another detail. The natural drainage path crossed directly through the area where residents were using my ranch road. That section looked dry most of the year. But underneath, the soil remained saturated much longer than people realized. Most folks wouldn't notice. I did. Water was literally my profession. And Brenda had no idea. A week later, Silver Creek held a community meeting. According to several residents, Brenda announced she was going to prove once and for all that the road belonged to everyone. She planned a demonstration drive, a convoy. Residents would drive the route together and show the county that community access existed. Apparently, nobody thought this sounded ridiculous. At least 5 families agreed. The event was scheduled for Sunday morning. When I heard about it, I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. The weather forecast did the talking for me. 2 days before the convoy, a powerful storm rolled through Mason County. Not enough to flood anything, just enough to dump several inches of rain. The kind of rain most people forget after a day. The kind engineers never forget. Saturday evening, I walked the pasture, checked conditions, looked at runoff patterns, studied the drainage channel. Then I went home. Sunday morning arrived bright and sunny. The sky was blue, birds were singing, and 5 luxury SUVs rolled proudly through the opening where my gate once stood. Witnesses later said Brenda looked triumphant, like a general leading an army into battle. The first vehicle made it about 200 yards. The second made it slightly farther. The third didn't even reach the bend. One after another they sank. Not dramatically, not instantly, slowly. The way quicksand works in movies is nonsense. Real mud is worse. It lets you believe you're fine, until you're not. Tires spoon. Drivers accelerated. Vehículos satladope. Within 20 minutes, all 5 SUVs were stuck. Axle deep, completely immobilized. People climbed out screaming. Shoes disappeared in mud. Toe straps snapped. One resident actually called roadside assistance. The operator reportedly laughed. Then someone called the sheriff. Unfortunately for Brenda, they got Deputy Frank Morrison. And Frank already knew the entire history. By the time I arrived, the scene looked like a disaster movie. Residents covered in mud. Luxury SUVs tilted at awkward angles. Arguments everywhere. Brenda stood near the front yelling at anyone who would listen. The moment she saw me, she pointed. This is his fault. Frank looked at her, then looked at me, then back at her. How exactly is it his fault? He knew this would happen. I couldn't help smiling. Frank nodded slowly. Ma'am, did he invite you onto his property today? Brenda didn't answer. Did he tell you to drive here? Silence. Frank pulled out a notepad. Then another. Then another. The citation started immediately. Criminal trespass. Property damage. Fence destruction. Unauthorized access. The list kept growing. Brenda's expression changed with every page. For the first time since I'd met her, she looked uncertain. But the real damage came 2 weeks later, because the drainage records I discovered triggered an official county review. Investigators found missing infrastructure, missing compliance work, missing stormwater controls. The findings pointed directly toward decisions made during development and toward people connected to those decisions, including Brenda's husband. News spread quickly. Residents were furious. Board members resigned. Lawyers got involved. Special meetings followed. Within 2 months, Brenda Collins was no longer HOA president. The woman who spent years acting like she owned everything couldn't even keep control of her own board. The destroyed gate? The insurance settlement paid for a new one. A much bigger one. The citations? Several stuck drivers paid thousands in fines and recovery costs. And my ranch road? Nobody used it again. These days when I sit on my porch at sunset, I can see Silver Creek Estates in the distance. The houses are still there. The HOA still exists. Life goes on. But every now and then somebody asks about the old road. And somebody else inevitably tells the story. The story about the HOA president who destroyed a ranch gate. The story about 5 luxury SUVs buried in Texas mud. The story about what happens when entitlement meets private property. And every time I hear it, I remember something my father used to say. The land is patient, son. Turns out he was right. Because sometimes the land doesn't need revenge. Sometimes it just waits for foolish people to provide it themselves.